The defense ministers of India and China talking about the situation along the line of actual control in Ladakh. The Chinese defense minister sought a meeting with Rajnath Singh, General Wei Fenghe of China and Rajnath Singh, defense minister of India. The meeting started at 9:30. It continues, and the effort from the Chinese side, what we are being told, is to dial down tension, especially after India on the 29th and 30th of August occupied some very critical peaks south of Pangong. So especially Rinchinla, the Magar Hill, the Gurung Hill, Rizangla at the line of actual control, and this has the Chinese completely on the back foot, because from here, from Rinchinla and from the Blacktop Peak on south of Pangong, so India can very effectively not only dominate but also, if required, interdict the Chinese advancing from their base at Moldo, coming down from Yula, coming down from the G219, the highway towards the Spangur Gap. And this is something perhaps the Chinese just did not anticipate. What is it that the Chinese are seeking? From what we've been told by sources, the Chinese want India to leave Rinchinla. India is saying very firmly that talks can move forward once status quo ante is restored at the line of actual control, especially the pre-May 2020 scenario. And that's not just partial disengagement, but de-escalation, and more crucially, de-induction of troops of the mechanized and motorized divisions of China back to their peacetime locations. India Today's Geeta Mohan joins us for more on the story in just a moment, but Nandan Unnikrishnan is a veteran journalist. He's in Moscow. He joins us on the broadcast. And Mr. Unnikrishnan, what can you tell us about this meeting? It was apparently rather last minute. The Chinese had sought a meeting even last time that Rajnath Singh was in Moscow, but this time it's finally happening, sir?
Yeah, well, they are meeting, which is unusual in itself, because normally defense ministers are not the ministers that begin any kind of negotiations. But clearly tensions are dying down, because if you look at the BRICS statement that was issued today, the very fact that they did issue a statement shows that some kind of lowering of temperatures is taking place. As to what exactly is transpiring between the defense ministers, I think it's a bit too early to speculate about that. Hello.
Fair enough. Let me also bring in Lieutenant General Rakesh Sharma, former Fire and Fury co-commander, who joins us on the broadcast. Also with us is Ambassador Prabhu Dayal. But General Sharma, China seeking dialogue, Chinese defense minister seeking a meeting with the Indian defense minister. Did the events of August 29 and 30 bring about this desire on the Chinese part to engage, to dial down tension? Because so far, while the generals remain engaged, while the diplomats remain engaged, there was palpable tension along the line of actual control. And in your appreciation, do you see tension go down, or is this more deception on the Chinese side?
Thank you, Gaurav, for inviting me. I think the events of the last few days have imposed a caution and little concern for the Chinese, because actually they were not expecting such large movement by us, and occupation of a vast area in the Chushul sector, from one side the south of Pangong, so on to the other side 30-odd kilometers away, the Razangla and Renchingla. And it actually turns the defenses, turns his movement, and it provides us immense amount of visibility into the depth areas. So naturally, it made some immense amount of change. And secondly, when they tried to come to Chumar, they were blocked at night in Chumar also. So the whole message is that there is a different attitude being shown by us, and their kind of attitude that they were showing in the last 4 months, okay, it is behind us and there is a new movement. And therefore, I would say that, the statements been made by Mr. Wang Yi in Paris mention about demarcation of the line of actual control, or what is this meeting happening now, they are all actually giving out a feel that there is a desire to move forward. And a similar statement has also been made by our own foreign minister that finally talks would help. So, despite the fact that there are talks and we hope that things will go better.
Oh, absolutely.
We have
Talks
to be
would
very
help.
cautious. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we have to be cautious.
Absolutely.
I said.
You know, Geeta Mohan also joins us on the broadcast. And Geeta, without mentioning China, Raksha Mantri Rajnath Singh did say that in the SCO environment for progress, there needs to be trust, there needs to be peace and tranquility. Now, the indication very clearly was China. There is no trust between India and China because of Chinese deceit and deception at the line of actual control. But what are you picking up, Geeta, from the Indian camp about China seeking these talks and the road ahead?
Well, we do know that the kind of decisions taken by India, the kind of actions that have been taken by India at the border itself, Gaurav, really were the reasons why the Chinese side thought it best to come to the talking table. The request for talks was made by the Chinese side and not by the Indian side. Having said that, like External Affairs Minister yesterday, Foreign Secretary Harsh Shringla today, and the Indian leadership have maintained and continue to maintain that dialogue is the only way forward. Is not because India is weak or not resolute. India is quite firm in its belief that it will not allow it will protect its sovereignty and territorial integrity in all ways possible, even militarily if need be. But in the dialogue, if you see the body language, and that's quite interesting, Gaurav, if you pull out those pictures of the meeting that has taken place or is underway between the Chinese defense minister and the Raksha Mantri, you will see in the body language that a very strong message is being put forth. Sometimes you need to dialogue with the other side to put your views forward. And the view of India and the stance of India is very clear, that unless and until the Chinese forces pull back, there can be no forward movement on any other front. In fact, if anything, they will only be seeing adverse actions on the economic front and the strategic front vis-a-vis China.
Nandan Unnikrishnan, you seeing the Indian camp, the Chinese camp also, the Russians very close to us for decades, but also close to China. How is this being viewed in Moscow? How is this being viewed in Russia on ground zero, sir?
Its friends are in a locked-in sort of a dispute. But at the same time, Russia does not view India's relationship with India through a prism of its relationship with China. It is quite independent of that. And the actions of the last 3-4 months clearly indicate that Russia values its relationship with India, whether it's a question of meeting with the defense minister and promising to meet all our defense requirements in a timely fashion, whether it is agreeing to participate in the maneuvers which start tomorrow, on the 4th and 5th near off the Andamans, despite the fact that we did not go for Kafkas. Clearly an indication that they are not hostile to India. They are sympathetically disposed towards India and will not jeopardize this relationship.
Fair enough. Those exercises off the Malacca Straits between the navies of India and Russia are quite crucial. Ambassador Prabhu Dayal, the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi was in Europe. He was under some pressure in Oslo, where he tried to mount counter pressure on Norway, saying giving a Nobel Peace Prize to the Hong Kong protesters would be viewed adversely. In Germany, the German foreign minister put pressure on China, saying restore democracy in Hong Kong, restore rights of Uyghur Muslims in Xinjiang. Is China under international pressure? Is that why they're seeking dialogue with India to ease some pressure, at least along the line of actual control?
Well, first of all, Gaurav, thank you for having me on your show. It's such a pleasure to be here. There has been pressure on China from various countries which are friends of India. But the fact is that India, through carefully executed steps, has been able to send a message to the Chinese that if they want to escalate matters militarily, we are ready to take them on. The real fact is that our troops have outwitted the Chinese, and as you pointed out, our troops have gained a vital strategic advantage in the Chushul sector. You spoke about the Indian troops thwarting Chinese moves and occupying dominating heights. Now, that is the main reason why the Chinese are worried. As you pointed out, the Chinese defense minister had sought this meeting.
Okay.
But I wonder whether he would have sought this meeting if they felt they were in a stronger position in eastern Ladakh than we were. Of course, we have been repeatedly calling for dialogue, and we have been repeatedly asking that the diplomatic route be taken.
Yes.
My co-panelist earlier spoke of the foreign minister, Mr. Jaishankar, saying that a solution to the India-China border dispute has to be found in the domain of diplomacy. Earlier today, the Foreign Secretary, Harsh Shringla, has said that dialogue is the only way forward. But the fact of the matter is that the Chinese were trying to make territorial changes in the LAC area. And we put it across to them very clearly that we will stand firm.
And unilaterally and unacceptable. Yes.
Correct. And our army chief made it very clear when he said, we will ensure that
and that firmness comes from your army holding ground. Absolutely. So, General Sharma, in your appreciation, the fact that Indian Army is holding ground, the fact that Special Frontier Force, the Tibetan soldiers are being used, and India is making that point publicly. What does that indicate? Is that again changing the rules of the game, and would that make China uncomfortable?
Okay, thank you, Gaurav. I take a step back first and say that why did we do all this that we did in the last week? I think, this was also because of these meetings that were lined up to provide strength across to the two ministers who will be meeting their counterparts of the Chinese, or there may be meetings with these people this week and the next week. So it was done in a very timely manner or timely fashion to make sure that they were able to talk from a position of strength. So I think, all this has been well orchestrated. Now, you say about the Special Frontier Force. It's not that Special Frontier Force has totally not been used earlier, but this time it was used in a forceful manner to occupy an area which is Ladakh, and it is a message being conveyed to the Tibetans. There's also a message being conveyed across to the Chinese, and it matters. See, to occupy 30 kilometers, there will be many other battalions utilized, but we have actually come down to bringing it across to the world opinion and also to the Chinese that there was a unit of the Special Frontier Force. I think the message would have gone home loud and clear.
Okay. And look at the multiple level of messaging before I bring in Geeta and Nandan Unnikrishnan. The fact is, you've used your Special Frontier Force, which means Tibetan soldiers. The fact that you have Indian Navy exercising in South China Sea, what would China's reaction be to that? We've been reading it in the Chinese newspapers. The fact that Chinese apps are being banned and their market valuation is collapsing in days and months. So Nandan Unnikrishnan, in your appreciation, and since you watch India, China, Russia, the region very, very closely, in your appreciation, will this compel China to at least now have an honest dialogue, or like in the past, China starts a dialogue when it's weak, and moments later, the moment it thinks the adversary is on the back foot, China will then make its big attack, sir?
Well, I think China will talk right now. Whether this will deter or change Chinese long-term behavior, I am not sure at all, because what has happened is we've made some tactical gains, but at the strategic level, China is still ahead of us in terms of overall national power, and they have a particular agenda. But I think what we have succeeded in doing is showing them that we are not going to be rolled over, that we are resolute, as Geeta had pointed out, and that probably in the case of India, diplomacy may be the best way to try and resolve whatever problems are there. But whether this will, in the long term, deter the Chinese, I am not certain.
And what does that resolution mean? Yes. Yes. Oh, absolutely. And what does resolution mean? Resolution clearly cannot mean that China just moves back this time because it's tactically on the back foot and then comes back again like it has in the past. Now, before I come to Geeta, I want you to listen to what Chief of the Army Staff General Manoj Mukund Narvane said in Leh this morning. The general spent time with troops, including with troops who were there at Chushul. He met the brigade commander. He flew over Chushul. He landed at Chushul. And that sends out a very big signal, not only to own troops, but also to the adversary.
Leading from the front, Army Chief General Manoj Mukund Narvane has spent the last 36 hours with his troops on the ground. At the front lines of eastern Ladakh, facing off with China. Unlike Chinese troops, who won't ever get a chance to see their military leaders, here's the Indian Army Chief at the front lines. He even traveled to Chushul, within sight of the latest and most aggressive flashpoint. And hours after meeting his commanders and soldiers, he spoke out, but to this country as well as to the other side. He started with a factual declaration of the situation.
Well, as you know, for the last 2-3 months, the situation has been a little tense. But we have continuously been engaging with China, both at the military and the diplomatic level.
As the man calling the shots, his words reverberate and come as a reminder that conflict is a real possibility. But then he goes on to make the categorical claim that the Indian Army's actions in the last week have been unprecedented.
Keeping in view of the situation, we had undertaken some precautionary deployments for our own safety and security. And these deployments we undertook along the LAC so that our security and integrity remain safeguarded.
The meaning is clear. As we told you here on India Today, the Indian Army is no longer playing defensively, but preempting and taking first mover actions to thwart the Chinese.
They are highly motivated, their morale is high, and they are fully prepared to deal with any situation that may arise.
This isn't a casual claim by the Army Chief. With winter approaching and long developments likely, his presence on the ground had hugely boosted morale that has already been high. A major message to the adversary.
We are very sure that through this medium of talks, whatever differences we have will be resolved, and we will ensure that the status quo is not changed and we are able to safeguard our interests.
The Army Chief has echoed India's stance that a resolution through dialogue remains a priority, but the unsaid is even louder. That China will be responsible for the cost of any misadventure or underestimation of India's will to not just defend but offend too. This was General Narvane's fourth visit to Ladakh during the current standoff. He earlier visited along with the Prime Minister Narendra Modi and then with Defence Minister Rajnath Singh. It is on his shoulders that a war-ready army stays awake and on its feet. Bureau Report, India Today.
Geeta, this is the Prime Minister, the External Affairs Minister, the Defence Minister, the Army Chief, the Chief of Defence Staff. The national security apparatus, Geeta, is speaking in one voice. And as External Affairs Minister yesterday said, India is clearly not accepting China's preeminence in this region. That's contested, even if it means deploying more soldiers at the line of actual control, Geeta.
Well, Absolutely. Dialogue does not mean India is going to cede any space, not an inch in Ladakh. That's absolutely certain. And the message loud and clear that in this dialogue and through dialogue, China will have to understand that they need to pull back, that they need to go back and bring the April status quo back into place. Unless and until that happens, there can be no forward movement. Speaking of dialogue, it seems like Rajnath Singh and his Chinese counterpart have taken it in the literal sense. It's 70 minutes and counting, and the meeting is still underway, Gaurav, which means that there is a lot of conversation that has taken place. And with the body language and visuals or photographs that we are seeing, it doesn't seem like India is putting anything in a soft manner. It is a very strong stand that India has taken, and India is portraying or messaging that to Beijing through the defense minister. We know that the defense minister is not the ultimate power when it comes to China, but certainly the message is going to go to Beijing. Certainly the message is going to go to Xi Jinping, and he needs to hear what India's stance is. That's the reason why dialogue is essential.
Very clearly. Ambassador Dayal, look at India's actions, not just military action on ground, but the fact that Tibetan soldiers are used, Indian Navy ships are exercising in South China Sea, the fact that multiple Chinese apps have been banned, bringing down market valuation of those companies. China, a lot of their companies are out of upgrades in India, infrastructure projects in India. Is all of this impacting China, and not just in the short term, in the long term? Will that impact China's response, sir?
Well, of course, there is no doubt that the economic pressure which we have been able to exert, such as by banning a large number of Chinese apps, or the decision to take Chinese companies out of government contracts, these have had the desired effect of hurting China. But, you know, frankly, my gut feeling is the Chinese are only buying time. When the Chinese defense minister has sought a meeting, I don't think there is any sincerity on the part of the Chinese. They are just trying to see how they can undo the strategic advantage that India has gained by acquiring some heights in the Chushul sector. Now, I would not be inclined to trust the Chinese at all. And
that's
for that
a very
matter,
interesting point you
the
make,
world
sir.
doesn't trust them either. And I think we'll have to be very much on guard, and needless to say, our armed forces will have to be on the utmost state of vigil, because the situation on ground is to be monitored. As you pointed out, we want to take...
Absolutely. Goes without saying. If I may, General Sharma, I have 30 seconds on the broadcast. Even in 1962, the conflict happened in the month of October, and the Chinese went back in the month of November. Are we to think that till snowfall, till October, November, it is still campaign season, game season, and we could still see conflict, God forbid?
No, let me put it this way, that I agree with this, the remarks, and there's a lack of trust. And the lack of trust comes from the last 4 months, is also in the course of last 3 odd decades where there will be no movement on the demarcation or delineation. That's why, you know, all these meetings that have taken place, we didn't accept to their issue of buffers or coming to concessions that they were wanting us to move back into some areas, because there was a lack of trust, and therefore we have to be prepared accordingly for the lack of trust. Even the talks can continue, the dialogue can continue, but we have to be cautious of the fact that it is not a trustworthy enemy, and it can come with all the kind of cunning and guile that he can bring across to us to the fore. Therefore, this period of next 2-3 months is tough. But we have to say, if we have to negotiate with him, remove the divisions that he's got from Urumqi or from Hotan, which are sitting in the depth areas. Remove them away from the scene altogether. On the line of actual control, we'll have to be very cautious before we even give an iota of a thought process of moving back. Gaurav?
So that's a very important point you make. No buffer zone, no ceding territory, no moving back mutually on either side. I've run out of time on this show, but Geeta and I would be tracking the story very, very closely. Nandan Unnikrishnan in Moscow. Ambassador, Dayal, General Sharma and Geeta Mohan. For the moment, many thanks for joining me. That is all I have time for on India First this evening. Many thanks for watching.
Hello everyone, this is Rahul Kamal here. Hope you enjoyed this video. For the latest news and analysis, like and subscribe the India Today YouTube channel and don't forget to press the bell icon to stay updated.